Well, good morning, everybody. It's time for us to get started. We're in Numbers chapter 21, verse 10. And we are reaching really the closing section of the book of Numbers. So they've been in the wilderness, and they are, well, you remember on Thursday in our reading, they wanted to pass through Edom, and this whole exchange between Israel and Edom is presented like in the singular, as if it's a conversation between two individuals, right? And that's not uncommon for negotiations between two countries to be presented that way, right? We refer to Washington, right? We're not talking about George Washington. If we say that Washington is talking with, London, right? We mean that our country is talking with England, right? It's a figurative way of speaking. The way that the figurative language in that section goes, it reminds us of the last time that the man Israel spoke to the man Edom, when Esau, Jacob's brother, received him back gladly, no longer wanting to kill him, but welcoming him into his territory. And one thing, I don't know that we really pointed this out, remember then Esau invites Jacob to come to his house, right, to come join him on Mount Seir. And we don't ever see Jacob take him up on that offer, but Esau welcomes him in. This go around, Israel is just wanting to pass through Edom, and Edom will not allow it. All right, and whereas previously Esau had brought 400 men with him, and Jacob thought it was a threat, it turned out not to be a threat. Well, now Israel on Edom's border is facing down an army from Edom, and this time that army is serious. This time the army is meant for war. All right, so Israel will not go through Edom. And that brings us to this morning's reading, where we're going to, as we finish up Numbers 21, we're going to basically finish up from about here down, it scoops down here close to the Red Sea and then back up north. A big chunk of journey is covered in just a very few verses. All right, this is not a very eventful part of the trip. It's not until Numbers 22 that things start to get eventful and we get into kind of the final stretch of the book of Numbers, this long episode dealing with Balaam. Let's see. Otherwise, on Thursday, we also looked at Israel's further complaint that they complain that there's no food and no water. Of course, we've seen that there's been food and water all along. They're complaining that the manna that the Lord has given them is worthless. Right? They loathe it. They dread having to wake up and look at it. And so the Lord sends out fiery serpents that bite the people and they die. All right, and the solution is for Moses to cast a bronze serpent. And whenever anybody is bitten by one of these snakes, they look on the bronze serpent and they live. And of course, what does that all foreshadow? Jesus, yeah. I mean, that's what Jesus himself says in John chapter 3, that just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. All right, so we're supposed to see an analogy between Israel here, and the bronze serpent. And we're supposed to see the analogy between that and all of us today and Christ on the cross, right? That we're all in the position of Israel, and Christ is our bronze serpent, as it were, right? We look on him so that we may live. All right, so that brings us up to Numbers 21, verse 10, where we will begin this morning. Any questions or comments before we pray and jump into our new text? All right, then let's bow together. Righteous Heavenly Father, thank you for the many blessings that you've given us today. Thank you, Father, for this word that you have given us, that you have preserved for us from your servant Moses. Father, help us to read this faithfully. Help us, Father, to take the example of Israel to heart. And help us, Father, to learn from the story of Balaam that we are about to begin today. Thank you, Father, for all of the gifts that you have given us in your Son. It's in his name that we pray. Amen. Okay. Numbers 21, verse 10. Let's see. Yeah. And the people of Israel set out and camped in Obot. And they set out from Obot and camped at Ye-Abarim in the wilderness that is opposite Moab toward the sunrise. From there they set out and camped in the valley of Zered. And from there they set out and camped on the other side of the Arnon, which is in the wilderness that extends from the border of the Amorites. For Arnon is the border of Moab between Moab and the Amorites. Therefore it is said in the book of the wars of the Lord, Wahev and Supra, and the valleys of the Arnon, and the slope of the valleys that extends to the seat of Ar, and leans to the border of Moab. And from there they continued to Beer, that is the well of which the Lord said to Moses, gather the people together so that I may give them water. All right, so the name Beer just means well. Then Israel sang this song, Spring up, O well, sing to it, the well that the princes made, that the nobles of the people dug with the scepter and with their staves. And from the wilderness they went on to Mattanah, and from Mattanah to Nahaliel, and from Nahaliel to Bamot, and from Bamot to the valley lying in the region of Moab, by the top of Pisgah that looks down on the desert. Okay, so short passage, but we've got a lot of traveling going on. And by this point, I had forgotten, before the incident with the bronze serpent, Israel has already traveled south around Mount Seir and come up. And where we see them today is that they come up close to Obot, and then they start proceeding north. And here we're starting to hit the borderland between Canaan and Moab. All right, so they're going to be basically coming around from the east side, which is why the text has this bit about them passing through a land towards the sunrise, so because it's east of the promised land. Because they're ultimately going to come up around this way and cross north of the Dead Sea. They're going to cross the River Jordan up here, ultimately, once they get over there. There's really not a whole lot that's significant about these place names. I know for as many as we've gotten, we're used to seeing really significant place names. A lot of them are fairly straightforward and don't have a whole lot of meaning for the story. Other than that, we should notice, whenever they come to Beer, so whenever they come to the well, we're told that the Lord has given Moses this instruction. Right? This is the first that we've seen of it, as far as I'm aware. The Lord said to Moses, gather the people together so that I might give them water. All right, so that's something that is already kind of fraught in this book, right? Because they're constantly complaining about water. Moses has lost his access to the promised land over water. And the text tells us that the Lord has already planned, right? He's already told Moses, you're going to take Israel to this place, to a well. All right, so they're still kind of out in the wilderness, but they're not having to get water out of rocks, right? They're at an actual well where they can get water up out of the ground like normal people, right? Because that's the norm in the ancient world, well water. So that's already planned, right? There's no excuse for Israel to complain about anything. It's already in the books. Well, notice Israel's response. Israel sang this song, Spring up, O well, and sing to it, the well that the princes made, that the nobles of the people dug, with the scepter and with their staves. Now, they're referring back to when this well was dug. Let's see. Let me see if I can find it here. But notice, while I'm looking that up, what do they not mention? God. So the text tells us that this is something that the Lord has prepared for them, and they are focused on looking back into the past. Right? They're focused on who dug the well. Right? They're not focused on who has brought them to the well and whose plan it is that they end up at this well. So again, even in this, we don't see a rebellion, but we still see just generally a lack of faith in Israel and a lack of gratitude to the God who's leading them. All right, so they come up to, we're going to have to get a bigger map here. And this one, you'll have to excuse it. It is this map is a mess. We're just going to say that. So on this map, we're coming up to around this area. This kind of changes the focus a bit. We are now down on this part of the map. All right, but they are coming up into this territory between the Moabites and the Amorites. That brings us up right to the border of both nations. And you're going to see how both nations respond, starting in verse 21. But before we start there, any questions or comments? Again, a lot of travel, not a whole lot of incident. Joe?
For that song, mine refers to Isaiah 33:22, and there they call the Lord the lawgiver.
I'm sorry, so what verse was that note for?
That was for the song.
For the song?
Yeah, that they sang.
Okay.
It referred to Isaiah 33:22.
Isaiah 33:22.
And there they refer to the Lord as the lawgiver.
Let's see. Yeah, the Lord is our judge, the Lord is our lawgiver, the Lord is our king, he will save us. I'm otherwise not sure what connection Isaiah 33:22 has to the song, other than that it's a contrast.
Is that saying then that it's the Lord that dug the well? Gave them the well?
That is the idea that's presented in the text, right? That it is prepared for them, it's the Lord's intent to bring them there, and he's instructed Moses ahead of time.
But I meant even in the song it said, dug by the nation's nobles, by the lawgiver.
Okay. Let me have a look here. Yeah, with the scepter and with their staves. Let's see. Lawgiver. Let me look that up real quick. That might be a connection there. No, I'm not seeing it there. Let me go back to Isaiah. Let's see what word we have for lawgiver there. Adonai, judge. Yeah, that is the same word there for lawgiver. It may be perhaps that they recognize the Lord's role in it. Although in the context of what they're singing, it makes it sound like they're talking about humans. Right, so they say, what translation are you reading from? New King James?
New King James.
Okay. All right, so the ESV reads, the well that the princes made, that the nobles of the people dug. Does the New King James read significantly different from that?
It says the well the leaders sank, dug by the nation's nobles, by the lawgiver with their staff.
Yeah. So everything else in that verse seems to be aimed at human beings. The princes of the nation or the leaders of the nation, the nobles of the people digging it with their staves. I think Israel has in mind a human lawgiver here. So that is a good connection, though. Yeah, because that is the same word. But it also, it kind of draws out the irony of it. That, yeah, they recognize a lawgiver has dug this well out, but they don't really recognize like who the true lawgiver is in this sense. Like Isaiah confesses the Lord to be the lawgiver. Here, Israel is looking to other human beings. So that's a good catch there. Any other questions or comments before we go into verse 21? All right. Then Israel sent messengers to Sihon, king of the Amorites, saying, "Let me pass through your land. We will not turn aside to field or vineyard. We will not drink the water of a well. We will go by the king's highway until we have passed through your territory." All right, so all of this is very familiar, right? Because we just saw this with Edom. They're making the same request of the Amorites. We want to pass through your land. We're not going to touch anything. We're going to stay on the road. And Sihon, the king of the Amorites, has essentially the same response, but it ultimately turns out differently. But Sihon would not allow Israel to pass through his territory. He gathered all his people together and went out against Israel to the wilderness and came to Yahaz and fought against Israel. And Israel defeated him with the edge of the sword and took possession of his land from the Arnon to the Jabbok, as far as to the Ammonites, for the border of the Ammonites was strong. And Israel took all these cities, and Israel settled in all the cities of the Amorites, in Heshbon and in all its villages. For Heshbon was the city of Sihon, the king of the Amorites, who had fought against the former king of Moab, and taken all his land out of his hand, as far as the Arnon. Therefore the ballad singers say, "Come to Heshbon, let it be built, let the city of Sihon be established. For fire came out from Heshbon, flame from the city of Sihon. It devoured Ar of Moab, and swallowed the heights of the Arnon. Woe to you, O Moab! You are undone, O people of Chemosh. For he has made his sons fugitives, and his daughters captives to an Amorite king, Sihon. So we overthrew them. Heshbon as far as Dibon perished, and we laid waste as far as Nopah. Fire spread as far as Medivah. Thus Israel lived in the land of the Amorites. And Moses sent to spy out Yazer, and they captured its villages and dispossessed the Amorites who were there. Then they turned and went up by the way to Bashan. And Og, the king of Bashan, came out against them, he and all his people, to battle at Edrei. But the Lord said to Moses, "Do not fear him, for I have given him into your hand, and all his people and his land. And you shall do to him as you did to Sihon, king of the Amorites, who lived at Heshbon." So they defeated him and his sons and all his people until he had no survivor left, and they possessed his land. All right, let's see. So we've got, here's Heshbon on this map. So they've come up quite a ways. And they're already starting to conquer territory here east of the Jordan. So God is already starting to fulfill his promise, but in an even broader way than what he has promised. Because what's typically the border of the promised land? At least up to this point, what have we always seen as the border of Canaan? It was the Jordan. Right, that's the boundary line. You cross the Jordan, you're into Canaan, and that's the promised land. But here, the Lord is already giving the nations over into Israel's hand. Right, so he's hinting at blessings even broader than he has promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Right, because when he makes the promise to Abraham, Abraham is in Canaan. Right, when he says, "I'm going to give you and your descendants all of this land." But now he's expanding that out. Yeah.
Some of this over here on this side is supposed to be like Manasseh.
That's what it's ultimately going to end up as the tribe of Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh. Yes. Well, so it's one of those things that it ultimately ends up being theirs. right? But if they're just looking at the promise that God has made to Abraham, like before they get there, they don't have any expectation that that land is going to belong to them. Yeah, it's the blessing of the Lord. Again, that he is giving them even more than he has offered, which, again, it's of a piece with everything that the Lord has done in the book of Numbers, right? That he has promised them he's going to take care of them, and he does more than that, right? And so already, and by the way, this also, this is of a piece with what the Lord had said earlier in Numbers 14. Whenever Israel is afraid to go up into the promised land because they're afraid they're going to be defeated and the Lord's not going to be with them. And here he's demonstrating to them, look, all you had to do was trust me, and I would deliver these guys over into your hand. All right, so already we've seen two kings delivered into Israel's hand, Sihon and Og. And that trend, well, that trend can continue. There's no reason why it shouldn't. So we'll see whether Israel messes it up or not. Any questions or comments about this little bit of conquest here? There's not a whole lot to say about it. Let's see. All right, so let's start in Numbers 22. So I wanted to crack into Balaam today. We've got a little bit of time. Numbers 22, verse 1. Then the people of Israel set out and camped in the plains of Moab beyond the Jordan at Jericho. And Balak, the son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. And Moab was in great dread of the people, because they were many. Moab was overcome with fear of the people of Israel. And Moab said to the elders of Midian, "This horde will now lick up all that is around us, as the ox licks up the grass of the field." So Balak the son of Zippor, who was king of Moab at that time, sent messengers to Balaam the son of Beor at Pethor, which is near the river in the land of the people of Ammah. And we'll talk about that in just a second. To call him, saying, "Behold, a people has come out of Egypt. They cover the face of the earth, and they are dwelling opposite me. Come now, curse this people for me, since they are too mighty for me. Perhaps I shall be able to defeat them and drive them from the land. For I know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed." All right. Before we go any further into the story of Balaam, I want us to stop and consider who it is we're talking about, who we're dealing with here. You'll remember at the end of Genesis chapter 19, there is it's kind of a sordid story, right? I mean, all of Genesis 19 is kind of sordid. We remember, obviously, the bits about Sodom and Gomorrah, right? But what happens after Sodom and Gomorrah? So first off, who all is able to escape from Sodom and Gomorrah? Lot. How much of his family? Yeah, his wife is turned into a pillar of salt, so he's left his two daughters, and they end up living in a cave. And do you remember what the daughters are worried about? They're worried that he doesn't have a son to carry on his name, and that he's going to be cut off. And so they need a solution to it, and they pick probably the worst possible solution, right? They get him drunk in the cave, and they conceive by him. Let's see. Let's go to Genesis 19, verse 31. Because this gives us a little bit of history. Genesis 19:31. The firstborn, that is the firstborn daughter, said to the younger, "Our father is old, and there is not a man on earth to come into us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve offspring from our father. So they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with their father. He did not know when she lay down or when she arose. The next day the firstborn said to the younger, Behold, I lay last night with my father. Let us make him drink wine tonight also. Then you go in and lie with him, that we may preserve offspring from our father. So they made their father drink wine that night also. And the younger arose and lay with him, and he did not know when she lay down or when she arose. Thus both the daughters of Lot conceived by their father. The firstborn bore a son, and called his name Moab. He is the father of the Moabites to this day. The younger also bore a son, and called his name Ben-Ami. He is the father of the Ammonites to this day. All right, and these are two of the nations that you're going to see Israel dealing with more now that they have traveled up to this region of the country. Here in Numbers, it's going to be Moab. All right, and remember Moab, I mean, both of these names are kind of grody. Like, Moab basically means from dad, which I know is bad. But he becomes the father of the nation of Moab. Now, what does that make Moab to Israel? Makes him kin. All right, because Lot is Abraham's nephew, right? At one point he's Abraham's heir before he moves off. And so that would essentially make, Lot and Isaac would be cousins. That would make Moab and Jacob, that is Israel's second cousins. But we're talking kin, right? Descended from the same people, ultimately. And so this brings us back. It's similar to, a lot of these nations, a lot of the nations that they'll deal with. The sons of Ishmael, the sons of Esau. We'll see the Ammonites as well. All of these people they're other nations by this point, but they're all related. And so Moab ought to treat Israel well, except Moab is absolutely terrified of Israel. And they go even further than Edom has, or than Ammon has. Or not Ammon, sorry, but the Amorites. So Israel has asked both of them permission to pass through their land. They say no. They bring out armies to the border, and that's it. That's all they do. That's all Edom does. The Amorites attack, and they lose. Here, the king of Moab, Balak, the son of Zippor, he plans on going into battle, but first, he's going to make sure he can win, right? Because he's just seen these two other kings lose. And so he calls up Balaam, the son of Beor, at Pethor, which is near the river in the land of the people of Ammah. That's not a great translation by the ESV. In fact, the word Ammah they've just chosen not to translate, and it's not a hard word. So Pethor is near the river in the land of the sons of his people. That's what Ammah means. So the land of the sons of his people. It's kind of a weird place name, but it'll make some more sense in just a minute. All right, so they have gone. Again, I said this map is all kinds of a mess. We get this place name Pethor in one other place. I want to say it's in Deuteronomy chapter 23. In fact, let me go ahead and look it up real quick. Yeah, it's Deuteronomy 23:4. We're there. All right, Moses is summarizing what happened. And the verse reads, "Because they did not meet you with bread and with water on the way when you came out of Egypt, because they hired against you Balaam the son of Beor from Pethor of Mesopotamia to curse you." Or if you're reading another translation, let me see what the others say. Okay, they translated Mesopotamia there as well. In the Hebrew, it is, let's see, Aram Naharaim. What it refers to is this area right over here. All right, yeah, so in fact, here on the map, they've got it labeled Mesopotamia in huge block letters, but underneath it, they have Padan Aram Naharaim. Now, we know this name. All right, in Deuteronomy 23, it says that Pethor, the home of Balaam, is in Aram Naharaim, which we know from earlier in the story as Padan Aram. Does that location ring any bells? Jacob. All right, now we're starting to draw some connections here. Because who lives in Padan Aram? Laban and who else? That whole branch of the family. In fact, it's only Abraham's part of the family that does not live in Padan Aram. In fact, this map, coincidentally, it includes the route of Abraham's journey. So remember, he starts out down here in Ur of the Chaldees, and he travels up to Haran, which is near the river. So this is the river Euphrates right here. Haran is just east of the Euphrates, just east of Carchemish. And this whole region here is called Padan Aram. Now, we don't know exactly where Pethor is at. We have found a couple of sites that look promising. But the best guess for like the last couple hundred years has been that it's somewhere here south of Carchemish along the river Euphrates. In other words, right at the border of the land of Abraham's people. We're going to see some further connections as we read on. Now, notice, Balak, he's king of what? King of Moab. All right, Moab is way down here, right? He is sending up and over to get this man Balaam from the river, from Padan Aram, to come and curse the people of Israel. And Balak says, because I know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed. All right, Balaam apparently has a reputation for this, so much so, that Balak, hundreds of miles away, knows about him and knows to send for him. We'll see why he has that reputation in just a minute. So let's read in verse 7, Numbers 22, verse 7. So the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the fees for divination in their hand. And they came to Balaam and gave him Balak's message. And he said to them, Lodge here tonight, and I will bring back word to you as the Lord speaks to me. So the princes of Moab stayed with Balaam. All right, so right here, what unusual and special thing do we see out of Balaam? He knows the name of the Lord. Right? In our text, in your English text, Lord should be like in small caps or in all caps there. Because in the Hebrew, it has the name of the Lord. All right, this is not the first time that we have seen someone near the region of Padan Aram know the name of the Lord already. Remember that Laban tells Jacob, I've learned, incidentally, by divination, that the Lord is blessing me on your account. In fact, let me see if it's the same word. No, it's not the same word for divination here. Different word. But Balaam lives very near where Abraham's family is living. And just like Abraham's family, he knows the name of the Lord. There's this is never nailed down in the text, but there's a strong possibility that Balaam is related. In fact, remember the place name that it's given. Let's see. Balak sent messengers to Balaam the son of Beor at Pethor, which is near the river in the land of the sons of his people. All right, and again, it's like, what are we talking about? When we recognize that Pethor, being essentially in Padan Aram, puts it in the land of Abraham's people. Yeah.
In Genesis 19,
Mm-hmm.
it has a translation in my, or a footnote in my Bible, Ben-Ami,
Uh-huh.
Sodomite people.
Yeah.
Ben-Ami.
Yeah.
So it's the same place.
Yeah, more or less, yeah. So at least, yeah, same words. So that's where the Ammonites get their name. Yeah, sons of their people. Now, I mean, the Ammonites, they're settled down here. The land of the sons of his people is referring to this region here, to Padan Aram. So again, in other words, that suggests to us that Balaam's people, if that's the land of the sons of his people, then his people are essentially the same people as Abraham's. Again, we're not given any kind of like genealogy where we can show the relationship between them, but we're shown that they share a common place, and it is referred to as the land of the sons of his people, that is Balaam's people. And he knows the name of the Lord. So, the princes of Moab stayed with Balaam. Let's go to verse 9. God came to Balaam and said, "Who are these men with you?" All right, so, we see Balaam claim to these elders of Moab and elders of Midian that the Lord is going to speak to him and give him some answer. And then it happens. God comes to him in the night and speaks with him. "Who are these men with you?" And Balaam said to God, "Balak the son of Zippor, king of Moab, has sent to me, saying, Behold, a people has come out of Egypt, and it covers the face of the earth. Now come, curse them for me. Perhaps I shall be able to fight against them and drive them out." And God said to Balaam, "You shall not go with them. You shall not curse the people, for they are blessed." So Balaam rose in the morning and said to the princes of Balak, "Go to your own land, for the Lord has refused to let me go with you." So the princes of Moab rose and went to Balak and said, "Balaam refused to come with us." All right, so things look good so far for Balaam. Right, but again, we've read this kind of story before where someone initially gets a commandment from the Lord, and at first they obey, but then start to backslide, or they flirt with disobedience and then just go straight into it. If this were the end of the Balaam story, I mean, this would basically be the end of the book of Numbers right here. Right, roll credits right here. But then let's see what happens. Numbers 22:15. Once again, Balak sent princes, more in number and more honorable than these. All right, so what is Balak's tactic here? Yeah, he's gonna, basically, he is, it's the old adage, every man has his price. Right? And now Balak has set out to discover what Balaam's price is. And so he's going to flatter him with a greater retinue, greater in number and greater in honor than the ones that he sent formerly. They came to Balaam and said to him, "Thus says Balak the son of Zippor, Let nothing hinder you from coming to me, for I will surely do you great honor, and whatever you say to me I will do. Come, curse this people for me." All right, so what price has Balak just named? mean, look what he says. I will do you great honor. Whatever you say to me, I will do. Name your price. All right. Now, we've seen that sort of thing before. All right. This is very, very similar to, I'll give you anything up to half my kingdom. Right? How do these kinds of deals turn out? Not great. But Balaam answered and said to the servants of Balak, though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go beyond the command of the Lord my God to do less or more. Now, that sounds like obedience. That sounds promising, right? But let's consider what else he says. He doesn't stop there in verse 18. In verse 19 he says, so you too, please stay here tonight that I may know what more the Lord will say to me. All right, does that strike you? How does that strike you? Stay here tonight that I may know what more the Lord will say to me. I mean, what is there left to discover? Has the Lord been unclear with Balaam? No. He has not. If Balaam were actually being obedient, he might offer them as a good host, he might offer them a place to stay the night. But he would not say anything about, well, let me consult with the Lord again. Right? When he says, though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go beyond the command of the Lord my God to do less or more. Is he actually saying, does he actually mean, even if Balak were to do this, I wouldn't obey him? That's not what he means. What he means is, this is a wink-wink kind of statement. Right? The servants of Balak have told Balaam, name your price. And what Balaam is doing here, shrewdly by the way, because he doesn't just come right out and say, well, you know what, I would do it for a house full of silver and gold. What he does is he is suggesting the price without naming the price. We've seen this kind of haggling going on before. Right? Whenever Abraham haggles with the Hittites over the cave of Machpelah, right? This same kind of language goes on, where they insist they want to give the cave away for free. They don't really want to give the cave away for free. And Abraham says, no, I have to pay for it. And the owner of the cave says, well, what is 400 shekels of silver between friends? He doesn't ever actually say, okay, I'll give it to you for 400 shekels. Right? He suggests this is a reasonable price for it. That's just the way that bartering is done in the ancient Near East. Well, no, in the modern Near East, for that matter. It's still the way they barter over there. He says, though Balak were to give me his house of silver and gold, I wouldn't do this thing. He's named his price. And then he says, well, stay here that I may know what more the Lord will say to me. And God came to Balaam at night and said to him, if the men have come to call you, rise, go with them, but only do what I tell you. So Balaam rose in the morning and saddled his donkey and went with the princes to Moab. But God's anger was kindled because he went. And the angel of the Lord took his stand in the way as his adversary. All right, but wait a minute. I thought the Lord just told him, rise and go. What's going on here? Again, did the Lord make it unclear at all to Balaam what he was supposed to do to begin with? He was supposed to say no. Right? You can't curse this people. They are blessed. You're not going to do anything to them. But now Balaam has got this temptation in mind. He's got riches sitting in front of him. And this is the equivalent. I don't know if any of your mothers did this with you. But, if you declare your intention to do something that your mother disagrees with, and she tells you, you do what you think is right. What is she telling you? She's not telling you, if you think this is right, go ahead and do it. Right? That is exactly the opposite of what she's saying. And God is essentially doing that with Balaam here. Yeah, if the men have come to call you, sure, rise, go with them. Only do what I tell you. You do what you think is right, Balaam. And Balaam does not make the right choice. Balaam rose to go in the morning with the princes of Moab. And so God's anger was kindled because he went, and the angel of the Lord took his stand in the way as his adversary. All right, so we're right on the cusp of the famous bit with the talking donkey, but we're going to have to save that. And we're actually going to have to save it for a while because Holly and the kids and I are taking off to Illinois tomorrow, and we're going to be gone until next Tuesday. So it'll be Thursday, let's see, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the 24th before we get to the talking donkey. So good Halloween time talk. Talking donkeys. Thank you so much for your questions and comments and your kind attention this morning.